The world stood still last Monday morning when Cardinal Kevin Joseph Farrell delivered the solemn announcement that would shake the foundations of faith for 1.3 billion Catholics worldwide. Pope Francis, the revolutionary pontiff who challenged tradition and championed the marginalized, had passed away at 7:35 that morning. He was 88 years old. Just one day before his death, the frail Bishop of Rome appeared in St. Peter's Square, struggling to deliver his traditional Urbi et Orbi Easter blessing. Those fleeting moments would become his final public appearance, a silent farewell that millions around the world somehow sensed was coming. "Happy Easter," he managed to whisper, the words barely audible as he raised his hand in blessing. Little did the world know these would be his last public words. For 12 transformative years, Jorge Mario Bergoglio led the Catholic Church with a vision that broke boundaries and challenged conventions. As the first Jesuit pope and the first from the Americas, Francis embarked on a mission to reform the Vatican from its core, confronting corruption, addressing sexual abuse scandals, and challenging the Church to become a field hospital for a wounded world rather than a fortress of rigid tradition. His final days reveal a story of courage, preparation, and acceptance that few world leaders demonstrate in their twilight moments. While Vatican officials maintained optimistic public statements, Francis himself had privately accepted what was coming. "The end of my earthly life is very close," he reportedly told close confidants during his final weeks. The story of Pope Francis's final chapter began unfolding dramatically on March 3rd, when Vatican officials revealed he had suffered 2 serious episodes of respiratory failure. These weren't mere complications. They were life-threatening events caused by significant mucus accumulation in his lungs that required emergency bronchoscopies to clear his airways. At Rome's Gemelli Hospital, the Pope received intensive therapy for bilateral pneumonia, a condition particularly dangerous for someone of his advanced age. Doctors placed him on non-invasive mechanical ventilation, a sophisticated breathing assistance technique that delivered oxygen through a mask with controlled pressure. As news of his hospitalization spread, hundreds gathered in St. Peter's Square for a candlelight vigil led by Cardinal Robert Prevost. Social media erupted with expressions of concern and prayers, creating a global communion of worry for the pontiff's recovery. "Dear Pope Francis, we continue to keep you in all our prayers. May our Lord give you strength," wrote one follower online. Another commented, "Bless him. He sounds tired. May God heal and strengthen him." What many didn't realize was that this hospitalization was different from previous health scares. While Francis had faced serious health challenges before including colon surgery in 2021 and ongoing mobility issues from sciatica this time, those closest to him sensed a different gravity to his condition. From his hospital room, Francis continued, working with remarkable determination. Even as his breathing remained labored, he made governance decisions, approved new appointments, and convened meetings with key Vatican officials. He even planned for the canonization of 5 new saints, an act that some church insiders interpreted as Francis putting his final affairs in order. The Vatican's communication strategy during this period raised eyebrows among seasoned Vatican observers. When they released the first image of Francis since his hospitalization in mid-March, a photograph showing only the back of his head as he sat in prayer, speculation intensified. The unusual angle immediately triggered comparisons to similar images of Pope John Paul II during his final decline. Do you remember the image of John Paul from behind? One social media user commented, noting the eerie parallel to April 2005, when that beloved pontiff was also in his final days. Another person wrote, "This story has already been told." Indeed, the Vatican has a complicated history with transparency regarding papal health. Pope John Paul II's Parkinson's disease went unacknowledged for years despite his visible tremors, and John XXIII's cancer remained undisclosed until after his death. This pattern led some to question whether history was repeating itself with Francis. "The Pope doesn't look good," one observer noted on social media after Francis's final Easter appearance. Others expressed shock at his dramatically deteriorated condition, writing comments like "Poor Pope" and noting his visible struggle to speak. What makes Francis's final days particularly significant is something he revealed in a 2022 interview, that he had signed a letter of resignation years earlier to be enacted should he become incapacitated. "I have already signed my resignation," he stated then, explaining it was given to Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone during his tenure as Secretary of State. This preparation wasn't unprecedented. Francis noted that Pope Paul and Pius had taken similar precautions. But unlike his predecessor Benedict, who became the first pope in nearly 600 years to voluntarily resign, Francis never expressed an intention to step down, preferring instead to serve until the end. Those final weeks were marked by a leader rushing to secure his legacy. Sources close to the Vatican reported that Francis, aware of his declining health, accelerated appointments of key figures to influential positions, individuals who shared his vision for a more inclusive, outward-looking church that prioritized mercy over rigid doctrine. The timing of his passing carries profound symbolism. To die during the Easter season, Christianity's most sacred period commemorating resurrection and new life, adds another layer of meaning to Francis's departure. It echoes the passing of John Paul, who died during the Easter octave in 2015, a coincidence not lost on Catholic faithful worldwide. Francis's final meeting with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, just hours before his death, has already become a poignant historical footnote. Today I met with the Holy Father Pope Francis. I am grateful for his invitation to meet, and I pray for his good health, Vance wrote on social media, not realizing the gravity of the moment he had just witnessed. One follower later commented on the post, "Gotta be weird meeting a guy the day before he dies." The impact of Francis's papacy cannot be overstated. His encyclicals, particularly Laudato Si on environmental stewardship, and this year's Nosimo on divine love, redefined Catholic teaching for modern times. His decision to allow blessings for same-sex couples while maintaining traditional doctrine on marriage reflected his delicate balancing act between tradition and compassion. His frequent focus on the world's peripheries, refugee camps, prisons, impoverished communities demonstrated a commitment to making the church present among those society often overlooks. His critiques of unfettered capitalism and environmental exploitation earned him both admiration and criticism, with some conservative Catholics viewing him as excessively political. Now, as Francis's body lies in state in St. Peter's Square, the machinery of papal succession begins its ancient process. Around 200 cardinals from around the world are converging on Rome. Approximately 50 already live there, with 138 under the age of 80, eligible to vote in the upcoming conclave during the first week of May. This conclave promises to be uniquely unpredictable. Francis appointed cardinals from diverse backgrounds and regions who are largely unfamiliar with each other, creating what Vatican expert Tess Livingstone describes as an assembly that promises to be extremely lively this time around. The cardinals face a monumental decision, whether to continue Francis's reform agenda or chart a different course. Will they choose someone who embodies Francis's focus on mercy and inclusion, or select a leader who might emphasize doctrinal clarity and traditional practices? The answer will shape the Catholic Church's direction for decades to come. As Catholics worldwide process this transition, they reflect on a papacy that defied expectations from its first moments. When Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio appeared on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica on March 13, 2013, he immediately broke protocol by asking the crowd to pray for him before he blessed them, a humble gesture that set the tone for his entire pontificate. He chose the name Francis after St. Francis of Assisi, the 13th century saint who embraced poverty and rebuilt a church in crisis. The symbolism couldn't have been clearer. This would be a papacy focused on spiritual renewal, concern for the poor, and care for creation. 12 years later, as the faithful gathered to bid farewell to their spiritual shepherd, many recall Francis's own words about mortality and mission. "Life is a journey," he once said. "When we stop, things don't go right." Indeed, Francis never stopped. Even from his hospital bed, even as his breathing grew labored and his strength failed, he continued guiding his global flock of 1.3 billion Catholics. He continued working, praying, leading until his final breath. As the sun sets on the Francis era, the Church now enters a period of reflection and anticipation. For 9 days of official mourning, bells will toll across the Catholic world. Masses will be offered for the repose of his soul. And then, when the cardinals gather in the Sistine Chapel beneath Michelangelo's famed ceiling depicting creation and final judgment, a new chapter will begin. But for now, the world remembers the man who encouraged his church to go to the existential peripheries, and who lived by the motto he chose for his papal coat of arms: Miserando atque elegendo, by having mercy and by choosing. Francis's final Easter blessing, those simple words, Happy Easter, whispered with his remaining strength, now take on profound significance. For Christians, Easter represents the promise of resurrection and new life after death. It's a fitting final message from a pope who consistently emphasized hope in the midst of suffering and light in times of darkness. As Cardinal Farrell's official announcement echoed through St. Peter's Square at 7:35 this morning, Francis is now with God, a chapter of church history closed. But for 1.3 billion Catholics and countless others who admired this singular pope, his legacy of compassion, reform, and authentic witness will continue to resonate far beyond the walls of Vatican City. In that final video, seen by millions around the world, we witnessed not just the end of a papacy, but the completion of a mission. Francis often said the church needed to be bruised, hurting, and dirty because it has been out on the streets. Now, as he completes his earthly journey, history will judge whether he succeeded in creating that church he envisioned, one that, in his words, knows how to heal wounds and warm hearts.